If you're looking for a digital audio workstation that's easy to get started with, but has the functionality of a professional piece of audio software, then Reaper is a great option. Whether you're recording, editing, or mixing for music, podcasts, whatever, Reaper has you covered. But if this is your first digital audio workstation software, or you're moving on from something a little bit more straightforward like Audacity, it can be a little bit overwhelming when you first get started with Reaper. So in this video, I'm going to go through how to get started with Reaper. I'm going to show you how to download and install it. I'm going to show you the user interface and the main functions that you'll be using to get started. I won't go into a huge amount of detail on editing and mixing and things. I'll leave links in the description to videos that teach you how to do those. But in this video, yeah, you'll get a basic overview of how to install, the main editing functions, how to record your first piece of audio, and so on, just so you can get the hang of it, to remove the overwhelm, and so that you can get started with learning recording or mixing or whatever it is you're going to be doing with Reaper. I've divided the video up into 10 steps. The first step is to download Reaper. So whether you're on Mac, PC or Linux, you'll be heading over to reaper.fm and clicking download Reaper up there. You get to use Reaper for 60 days for free, and you can still use the software. It won't delete it from your machine or anything, but it does ask you to pay after the first 60 days, but it's the cheapest paid DAW that I know of. It's a single payment. I think it's about $60. Yeah, $60 for the discounted license at the moment. So yeah, if you do you've got 2 months to try it out. If you do get into it, then to me it's worth the $60, especially when you compare it with some of the other subscription-based software out there. So you just choose the operating system that you're on, click download, and then we're going to open and install that. You can install it portably if you want to install it on a flash drive, memory stick, so that you can carry it around with you and use it on any machine. Then it's a really useful option there. But we're just going to install it to the default C drive location. Very fast to install. It's a very lightweight, small program, which makes it great for portable recording, or just it's very fast to load and things as well. Let's run that. If you have any VST plugins installed on your computer already, then it should pick them up if they're in the right location. And to finish off the install, we're going to set up our audio interface. So if you've got an audio interface, or if you're just using your system audio, you go to Options, Preferences, and then up here you've got Audio System. Now by default, at least for me, this was set to wave out. Now, wave out only supports up to either mono or stereo. So if you've got an audio interface that has more than 1 or 2 inputs or outputs, it won't be able to pick them up on its default setting. So there's just something to look out for before you get started, so that you can get the full functionality out of your audio interface. You want to swap it to ASIO. Then you'll find your USB ASIO for your system. I've got a Focusrite interface. Then you want to enable inputs and choose the first and last input. So mine's the first mic input, the last is the last ADAT input, and then your output as well. So just pick the first one in the list and the last one in the list. And that means that when you want to record or choose your outputs, you'll have the full range that your audio interface can work with, and then just click OK. Now you'll be greeted with this Reaper user interface. I'm just going to go over the basic tools and toolbars that you'll see here and what they'll be used for. We're not going to go into every single little detail, just want to give you an overview so that you're more comfortable with getting started with Reaper. So here is where your tracks are going to be. If you're familiar with Audacity or anything like that, you'll see your tracks, just like with the other software, pop up on the left there, and then the audio is going to show in this central section, which you're going to see shortly when we import some audio. Up here you've got your timeline, which has seconds and beats and bars. To change your tempo, the BPM, you can double click on this one down here and change it to whatever BPM your song is if you're recording music, and then you've got your time signature as well, which you can change. At the bottom here we've got the mixer. So this is sort of another view of what you'll see on the left when you've got your tracks in. So each track you create, you'll see another one pop up at the bottom, And you've got your master fader there, which controls everything in your session. Everything goes through the master. You've got your transport bar there with your play, stop, and so on, record, the icons which you'll be familiar with. And then up the top here, we've got some of the most common settings that you'd expect. So open, new project, back and forward to undo or redo things, and then some editing settings that we'll go over in the editing part of this video. So let's add some tracks so you can actually see what's going on when we've got some audio in our session. So there are a few ways of adding tracks. You can either right-click this section over here, insert new track, or you can use the shortcut Control-T or Command-T on Mac. So if we press Control-T, it will automatically create a new mono track for us. And you can also see that it's popped up as track 1 in the mixer down here. Just a side note, if the mixer disappears for any reason, let's just remove it there. If you press Control or Command-M, or you go to View, Mixer, you can get it back. You can also move this if we find the... where is it? There it is. Yeah. If you find that, you can drag it up to make it smaller or larger. And then if we delete that track, right-click it and press Remove, I'll show you the other way of importing tracks. So if you find your tracks in Finder or in Explorer, you can highlight one or all of them and just drag them in. As long as it's the right format, like a WAV file or an MP3, something that Reaper can read, you can either put it on a single track or separate. We'll do separate and it will create 2 tracks for us. Automatically, it will create the 2 mono tracks because this is a mono recording. It's for a podcast, 2 speakers. And if you import a stereo file, it will automatically create a stereo file for you. And then on each track, you've got a mute and solo. So if we zoom out with the mouse wheel there and press play somewhere, or you can press the space bar or press the play. And then obviously icon. Just to add the sort of... so if I click M on there, that mutes that track. And if I click solo... It's in Jan 2020, right? Only that track will be played. And just to help differentiate the tracks better, if we highlight both of them over here, right-click, track color, and set tracks to random color, it'll make things a little bit prettier and easier to see the difference between the 2 tracks. On each track, you also get a little volume fader. So you can bring it up to plus 12 dB or down to nothing. Double click on it and it will go back to 0. And if you look at the bottom here, you see this is set to 0 on our first purple track. If we move this, it will also affect the fader at the bottom there. But you've got a few extra controls on your mixer, like panning. So panning it to the left or right speaker, which will be particularly useful if you're going to be working with music. And yeah, just you've got your input options and things as well for recording. I'm going to show you now how to record a little piece of audio. So if you're going to be recording with Reaper, then that's of course important. So if you right click and create a new track, we could do it on this track, but I'm just going to separate things. Let's make that a little bit bigger. If you click on this red button here, it arms the track for recording, and you can see and hear it's picking up my voice. Let's just mute that. So you're not getting 2 of me. Or you can click on this icon here. If you turn that off, so it's just grayed out, then it will stop monitoring. So even if it's not muted, you can't hear yourself back. Depending on what you're recording, you might want that monitored or not. And then we got the input option, which appears now that the track is armed. So this is picking up mic 1 in my audio interface. That's where my mic's plugged in. You can set it to whichever input your mic's connected to. If we create a new track, or let's say we were recording a band with just like a four-piece demo, we wanted 4 tracks, we could right-click and do insert multiple tracks and pick insert how many tracks, 3, and let's put it at the end of the project. And then that's got 4 tracks now for you. So if you armed all of these, let's just turn off the monitoring again with that speaker button. You could then go through the inputs, there. And yeah, if you've got 4 mics plugged into 1, 2, 3, and 4 on your interface, then it would be recording. So I've got nothing plugged into 2, 3, and 4, but we're going to just test it anyway, just so you can see what it does. So if I hit record now, what should happen is it's going to record on all 4 of those tracks that are armed. It's not going to record on these tracks because they're not armed. As you can see, it's not lit up, the record button. And it's going to pick up my voice on that first one where the mic's plugged in. So let's hit record, or you can press Control or Command R.
Welcome back to another episode of...
Let's mute that one. Hello, testing, and we're recording on this track through the microphone. Press space or stop to stop recording, and then it's going to ask you if you want to save your recordings, which of course we do. And if we unarm those for recording, just going to solo that one we recorded just to make sure it's recorded okay. Hello, testing, and we're recording on... There we go. I'm now going to show you the basics of how to edit with Reaper. Again, not going to go into a huge amount of detail. I'm going to leave a link in the description to a video that goes over how to edit a podcast in full. This would just show you where the most important tools are that you'll need to edit. And then if you learn more about editing going forward, it doesn't matter which DAW you're learning on, you'll be able to come back to Reaper and you'll know which tools, where you can find the tools that you need. So we've got 2 tracks here and it's a podcast. So we want to edit them together so that they stay in time. So for example, we don't want to be cutting, if we cut out that little bit of mumbling there, it would no longer be in time because we've just dragged that top one out but left that first one in position. So if we undo that with Control Z, if we highlight both of the tracks, hold Shift and click both of them and then press G for group, you can see that little green chain has appeared. That means these 2 are grouped together. So now whatever we do with the top one happens to the bottom one as well. We're doing some very fine edits here. And as you can see, when I click around, it's only snapping that cursor to those lines. And we want to be able to go in between the lines. So if you go back to this little toolbar we looked at when we looked at the user interface, you've got snap enabled there with the magnet. If we turn that off, we now have free control over where the cursor goes. And then you can start to make edits. So the quickest way to make a split or make a cut is pressing the S key, and it cuts wherever the cursor is. So you've got 2 separate, it's separated now. I mean, technically you've got 4 separate items. They call each of these pieces of audio items, and now it's been split. We could then click on the other side, split again, click the middle one and press delete, and then it's going to remove that piece of audio, and then we could just drag that back into place. You're going to be making a lot of edits though, most likely, if you're editing a podcast or even if you're editing some music, and we don't want to have to drag that back every time. So if we make that cut again, rather than deleting it and then having to drag that piece back, if you turn on ripple editing up here, this little grid, and press delete, it pulls everything back and fills the space for you, which is very nice. Now, if these weren't grouped, and just click that chain again to ungroup them, and we do it, again, it's only going to be affecting that top one, and then it will put it out of time. However, if you click on ripple editing again, you'll see it changes from ripple editing per track, if you hold over it, to ripple editing all tracks. So now, even though they're not grouped, it's still going to affect all the tracks. So that's just something to be wary of, however you want to do it. I normally use both grouping and, let's just group those back together again, and ripple editing for all tracks, just to be safe, and then just turn them off if I need to edit only one track. One nice thing about Reaper is that when you make a cut as well, or a split, as I call it in Reaper, it automatically gives you a little fade. So it fades out and fades in where you've split, which avoids like clicks and pops and things. If you drag a piece of audio over another piece as well, it automatically crossfades it, which saves a lot of time during editing. If you don't want that to happen though, you can click that up there to turn off auto crossfade, and then it will just put them on top of each other. But for most editing, you're going to be wanting crossfades to avoid any clicks and pops. We can also change the level of volume on a per item basis, rather than changing the volume of the entire track over here with your fader. You'll see, for example, that this is a nice healthy signal, this intro that's been recorded. The rest of it, especially this orange one, is very quiet. So what we can do is if we double click on this orange one, for example, you can see at the top, it says media item properties, 4 items selected. So we can change some settings on all 4 of these items, but we only want to be changing this one down here. So I'm just going to ungroup it for now, clicking that chain again and open that up, or we can right click and go to item properties. Then you've got a little volume knob, a volume fader there that lets you control the volume of just that item. So if you bring that up, let's say 9 dB, I think that'll be enough. Maybe a little bit more. Let's call it 12. Then we can bring that up to a nice, healthier signal. Then if you grab the top of it as well, you'll get the hang of this once you've done it a lot. It's quite tricky to find some of these little grabbers there, but if we grab that and drag, you can then drag it down, which makes it a lot easier for bringing things down in level. So we could now bring that top one up to match, because this one's a bit louder now, but if we double click on that one on its own, maybe bring it up by 6 dB or so. That looks a bit bigger. We'll listen as well, obviously, when we're mixing it. We'll listen to how it sounds and can adjust, but I think that's probably around the same level. And then we could just drag this one down to match. Might as well have a quick listen as well while we're here.
Thoughts on, in your opinion, what characteristics and traits do you believe make up a highly successful...
When I started out in the boiler room, when I started out doing the...
This one sounds a little bit louder, actually. You can never just trust the waveforms. You've got to trust your ears as well.
Thing from Tom's Korean recruitment, the good...
Okay. As we've done a little bit of work on this, we should probably save as well. So you can press Control or Command S, or you can click that up there, or find Save Project in your File menu. And then we can just save it as whatever we want. Let's just call it Reaper Practice. And another nice little feature about Reaper that some other DAWs don't have, if you have this checked, copy all media into project directory and this create subdirectory, it's going to make a folder for you, copy all the audio files from wherever they are on your computer and put it all into one place, which is nice. You just have to wait for it to move things. Now let's talk about mixing. Now again, I'm not going to go into exactly how to mix. I'm just going to show you where the tools are that you'll need so that when you do go through, whether it's my mixing videos or someone else's, you'll know when they say, all right, open up an EQ plugin, you'll know where to find it on Reaper, because it's all the same. Whichever DAW you learn mixing, the skills can be applied to any other DAW. It's just a case of knowing where things are, which is what this video is all about for Reaper. So as I said, you've got your faders there, you've got your pan pots and your solo and mute buttons. If you want to add effects to your tracks, it's this little FX button here. So for example, with the top one there, it comes up with a list of plugins. If you've got plugins already installed in your computer, again, you'll be able to find them here. But Reaper does come with a few nice plugins. We've got EQs, compressors, reverbs, all the things you'd expect. If you just double click on one, then you've got a nice EQ there, multi-band EQ, and you can add lots of bands and make your adjustments. And then if you've got a setup you're happy with, like let's just make a quick setup there that might look like something we'd have on a mix for a podcast, and then you wanted to save it. Where you've got here, you've got no preset. If you drop down, you can find various presets and you can add your own with the plus. So save preset, and it'll just save you time next time if you're mixing similar things. And then you just name it. So podcast vocals, for example, click OK, and you'd find it there. We've already got one from before, but the new one's down at the bottom there. And then to add more effects for this track, you can click add, you can remove ones already there or turn them on and off with these checkboxes here. So we can add a compressor. We could add a noise removal plugin, which is this one here, Refer. It's actually really good, especially for well, you get it for free for a couple of months and then it's very cheap. And yeah, it's a really nice noise removal tool, which I have gone over how to use in another video that I'll link in the description. Now let's talk about buses or group tracks. So if you want to put quite a big session together, or even if you only got a couple of tracks and you want to be able to easily make changes to both those tracks, you want to create a bus track or a group track. Depends on what software you're using, what they're normally called. But if we just create a new track there and put that one at the top, then highlight these two, holding shift and clicking both of them, we can just drag those into that track. And as you'll see, that blue line goes smaller, so you know it's under that track. And then that becomes a group. So as you see, this waveform that's come up is comprised of both the second and the first track. So now whatever we do with this, whatever effects we put on, if we compressed it or if we changed the level.
Yeah, good question. So for me,
you can see that it's affecting.
But I guess, why don't we start with it?
Oh, let's just turn off that noise removal.
But I guess, why don't we...
You can see that it's affecting both tracks. And then just be wary that if you delete this track, it says remove tracks there, so it will delete everything. If you want to uncouple them, if you want to take this out of the folder track or group track, you can click this little button here and it will remove them from the folder, and then you can just delete that. From a user interface standpoint, it's very useful as well. If you've got dozens of tracks, if you're doing a big song, you've got drums, guitars and vocals and things, having them grouped just makes it easier to organize them. With this button here, you can shrink them down. And just two more steps with how to get started with this software. We're going to look at mastering, and then we're going to render our file. So for mastering, there are quite a few tools available for you built in. Again, your master fader is already there for you at the bottom, and then any changes you make to this master track is going to affect the whole session. So if we open up FX there, you could add things like a limiter, which is going to stop your audio from going over a certain threshold. So if we put that brick wall ceiling to -1, it means that we're not going to get that nasty distortion that happens when your audio is going over the 0 dB mark. And then you've got analyzing tools such as, where is it? Loudness meter peak. Really useful one for if you're mastering a song or a podcast or whatever, you want to get it to the right loudness.
I started out in the boiler room.
It's going to monitor this for you,
doing
and you can make adjustments accordingly. But again, don't worry too much about this. If you want to learn more about mastering, check out the mastering video in the description. And then to render your file, to save it as an MP3 or a WAV or whatever you need, when you go into File and Render, it gives you a load of different file options. So the most important part of it is that you get the source right. So Master Mix will export everything into a file for you, or selected tracks. If I did that now, you can see that this one's, they've got a whiteboard around it, so it would only export that track. And then the bounds, at the moment it's entire project, so everything here from beginning to end is going to be exported. If we set that to time selection, then as you can see, it changes it. It's just 17 minutes it's going to render there, because that's the section that we highlighted. You've got the choice of the sample rate you want to render it as, whether you want to render it as stereo or mono. If you're adding metadata like ID3 tags to your MP3s, you can click on metadata, click on ID3, and then add your information for your artist and album and things. And then down here, you've got primary and secondary output format. It lets you output 2 files at once, which is really useful. So we've got the full quality WAV there, and then you could also add a secondary output format, such as an MP3, if you wanted a small file for your podcast or for sharing with friends or whatever. And then you just click render 2 files. I'm just going to set it to time selection to save time for the video, so that you can see the render process. It's going to render that section that we've highlighted there. And this is useful as well. It lets you see the overall loudness. It lets you monitor some things while it's rendering as well. And you can see exactly what audio it's rendering. And that's that. You click on Media Explorer, you can find where your files are. Open folder, you can find that export. We've got our MP3 and our WAV there. So that is how to start using Reaper in 10 steps. I hope this gives you a good foundational knowledge. I hope this reduces the overwhelm for if you want to start using Reaper, just so that you know what kind of what you're looking at and kind of where you need to go to find certain things if you want to start with editing or mixing or recording and so on. Again, if you want more support with any of these specific fields, then check those links in the description and let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular you want me to look into for Reaper, and I'll see what I can do about putting something together. And for more audio software tips and tutorials, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.